All right, here on the Bite Me podcast, it's time for one Captain Scott Null, who just backstory before we get into his story of how and what he is these days. Captain Scott and I just almost by chance via his younger daughter, right?
Right,
Younger
Aaron.
daughter who was an intern at Sports Radio 610 where I was working. Um, just kind of met by chance, kept in touch, via texts, etc. And all of a sudden decided to do the podcast. You guys have probably heard that story of how it all came about. But how did Captain Scott all come about to where he is right now, and the reputation that he has and has earned, etc. Scott, I keep referencing this Barbara Walters thing. I don't want to go full Barbara Walters, and how does it make you feel? How did that make you feel? I don't want to do all that, but it kind of turns into that. I like the self reflection, that Caleb had, which people just heard, and Dean is going to have as well later in this podcast. But for me, the most interesting thing has been, the influences of dads. Not necessarily exclusively dads, but I don't think people really know like where you're actually from, like born and raised. I mean, some people can maybe guess and figure it out, but let's start right there.
I grew up on the south side of Houston, around South Houston, Pasadena. I mean, it's kind of weird. I lived in Houston, was in the Pasadena school district, and went to South Houston. So we were right there on the corner of all three. But from the time I was, I guess, about 6 years old, I lived over off of Edgebrook.
Mm-hmm.
And prior to that, we kind of bounced around the south side. And then I think we did a year and a half in California. My dad got transferred. And I don't remember much of that one other than the earth moved. And when the earth moved and I can remember you saw them. You're the same age as I am. Dogs just came running in.
That's all right.
You're the same age as I am. Those ball lights that hung in the corner.
Oh yeah,
usually green or red.
Yeah,
it was a black metal on it. We had one of those in our dining room. I can remember it clear as anything in California, and it was swinging and hitting both walls. In the corner.
I'm out.
We were living in just outside LA in Whittier, and my mom had grown up in Texas. My dad too. They both from around Welder, Central Texas. And my mom went to my dad and said, "I'm moving back to Texas where the ground doesn't move. I'm taking Scotty with me, and you can come or you can stay." It's up to you. And so Dad got a transfer back.
And, what did he do?
He worked for Rath Meat Packing Company. You remember Rath?
Oh yeah.
He did bacon and hot dogs and stuff like that. My dad was over the hot dog part. So as a kid, I used to walk into those hot dog things, and I can remember they seemed like they were 20 foot tall. They were probably 6 foot, but just racks and racks of wieners hanging and being smoked and cooked. And you could walk in there, and those were the best tasting ones ever because you could just pluck them right off the vine, man. It was pretty cool.
So you actually saw how the sausage was made?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Camille just went to pick up one of the dogs, and apparently it's got a sore spot or something.
Oh. That's all right. That's all right. So you saw how the sausage was made?
Absolutely. And then he worked for Blue Ribbon for a while after that, Blue Ribbon Sausage. And he was in charge of spices and things like that. And he retired from Hafnia. Hafnia Hams was part of the Tyson Chickens.
Okay.
So he worked in the meat business most of my life. And he took me fishing continuously. I mean, we had a boat sitting in the driveway, and my job on Friday was to sit there and listen to the NOAA weather radar radio on repeat. And listen for that 5 to 10 southeast.
Hey now.
Seas 1 to 2 feet. And then we knew we could run offshore and go play out there. If not,
I didn't even know you went offshore early on. Yeah.
Well, we had no business. Probably had no business doing it. I mean, it was a 19-foot Galaxy with a 125 or 150 inboard outboard Merc on it. It was a ski boat.
Oh my gosh.
if the weather was bad, we went skiing. If the wind was blowing too much, we'd go over to Taylor Lake and go skiing. If it was nice enough, we ran offshore. Hell, we were 25, 30 miles out in that boat.
Holy moly! Well,
Mom
that's
right there with us.
yeah, that's a little daring. I'm sure you had some stories there, but so at least you grew up with a boat, which is a privilege.
Yeah, I mean, it was what we could afford. I mean, it wasn't super fancy or anything like that, but it was a multi-purpose little bow rider, and wasn't too bad. We had one before that. I don't remember what the name of that one was, but it was a real old style with the closed bow windshield.
Oh yeah.
I just remember it being dark green. I don't remember a whole hell of a lot about that boat.
Yeah.
But that's what we started with. I don't know where Dad found that one.
Well,
but,
go ahead.
Yeah, and my grandfather, both my sets of grandparents, they were living out in Welder area. I spent my summers out there, and on my dad's side, he worked for the county building dirt roads. So he knew every landowner out there. And a whole lot of them had him run their cattle in the afternoons. I'd go out with him and he'd drop me off at a pond somewhere. And he didn't care one bit about fishing, but he would sit there with me or he would go run cattle, and he made sure that I got to go out and fish. And the other side, that side of the family had some land in different places. And my grandmother would take me out and drop me off somewhere with a sandwich and a cooler and a 22 and a rod and reel. And just leave me.
How old were you about this time?
Probably 7, 8, 9, 10.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
That's how I grew up.
Yeah. So you were always outdoors, even though you were a Houston boy.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Constantly. Back then, I mean, Edgebrook was kind of the end of the world. Alameda Mall. That was from Alameda Mall. You didn't have any lights on Gulf Freeway till about Dickinson. And so we were right at the edge of town, basically. And me and my buddies, man, we hunted with BB guns and pellet guns all around Alameda Mall area. Ride our bikes and disappear and come back. And Mom just, as long as we came back before it got dark, everything was cool.
That was mine. They just get home, which is so weird nowadays. Like everybody would be just terrified. We'd leave in the morning, come back, before dark. Dark was it though. Once you hit dark, they got mad. But that was it.
Yeah, our main rule is we weren't supposed to cross the Gulf Freeway.
Okay.
And, pretty solid rule, I guess.
But you did.
9, 10, 11-year-olds. But yeah, we did. Mom's going to listen to this. She's going to throw a fit. Yeah, we went across at Alameda Genoa, had the bridge over it. And there was some old sand pits back there, and we'd go fishing in those sand pits. And that was, like I said, it was a long ride, but if we timed it right, we could get back.
That's what you did. So clearly, and we're going to get back to the outdoors, the fishing, the guiding, etc. for sure. You come by that naturally. I mean, obviously, like a lot of us, the influences were all there. You're always outdoors. The thing that I want to talk about now, though, is the law enforcement. I mean, clearly, you guys went to high school. Smart guy, could have done anything. How was it? Were you just that kid? I want to be a cop. I want to be an officer.
I worked at Marburgers over in Pasadena. Most people don't even remember that they had a store in Pasadena. It was off Spencer Highway. They had the one down in off 146 down there in Seabrook, and then the second store was over there off Spencer near Strawberry. And I'd worked in a grocery store and a bunch of different things. I started working at 14. And I remember my mom had gone Christmas shopping for me. She came back home. She said, I got a place that you need to go see, and you need to work there. And she took me over there. That was before I had a driver's license. And I was just about to get my license. She took me over there, and I hired on almost immediately and stayed there until I got on the police department. While I just turned 20. But working in there was a whole bunch of officers that came there. I sold all the officers their guns and ammo and stuff for Pasadena, LaPorte. A bunch of Houston officers slipped over there. coming over into Pasadena to go shopping in the middle of the day, and just talking to those guys, and had a few of them that said, "Man, you'd make a good officer. You need to think about it." I was going to college at U of H, and I was in architecture, and I was in my second year of that, and they brought in a bunch of the guys. That was a 6-year deal. I don't know what it is now, but it was a 6-year career path, that you had to go through. And the lead guy, I'll never forget, the number one graduate from the year before, they had all gone out, got their jobs, and he was making $24,000 a year. That was the number one dude. And the police department to go through the academy at the time was paying about 25, 26. I was like, I really want to be a cop. Mom and dad weren't too happy about it.
I'm sure.
They wanted me to stay in college and keep going with that. But I went through all the stuff when I was 19, and I turned 20 and December 22nd, and I got in the academy class January 9th.
I'll be damned.
Went on from there. Did 9 years on patrol, working night shift, 11 at night till 7 in the morning. Got an education in people.
Yeah, no kidding.
Honestly, some of the best salespeople that I've been around were cops.
Yeah.
And, later in life, that's what I ended up getting into. But you just learn how to deal with people and handle people. From there, I've trained rookies. The last 2 police chiefs in Houston were rookies of mine.
Oh, wow.
Troy Fenner and Larry Satterwhite. They were both 2 of my best rookies. I mean, I'd have to hand it to them. I had some good ones, but those 2 were right up there at the top. Still keep in touch with some of them. Eventually, I kind of got tired of the streets, and there was an opening for homicide. My beat was over in the Gulfton ghetto, and there was a lot of murders in that area in the 80s. And I got to know a bunch of the homicide guys because they were always out there every night. Yeah. And I helped them run down some of their murder suspects, and they'd come send us pictures and say, "Hey, man, this is who we're looking for." And a whole lot of it, they were all Central American. That was when the civil wars were going on down in Nicaragua and El Salvador. So we had a whole bunch of refugees up here, and they were always fighting and stabbing each other, shooting each other. And homicide guys relied on us to go find them. So when some openings came up in homicide, I went and put in for it. I think there was 400 and something people put in for like 8 or 10 spots. And went through a big, long interview process and got in up there, and spent the rest of my career working murders, kidnappings, and officer-involved shootings.
Oh, is that all? That's it? That's all you could do? So, I know some of these stories, but maybe you could share one here. You said run down some of those suspects. You meant literally. Give us a story or two of the old war story that our listeners can go, dang, that Scott did that.
Oh, man, we chase people on foot every night. I mean, Cops came out there. That was when Cops was first coming out on Channel 26, and they came out there and rode with all of us quite a few times. And we were in car chases 2 to 3 times a week. And rolling stolens was a big deal. Got really good at finding stolen cars, and it was a game, amongst between us and the crew. That's one of the cool things about night shift. You got cops and robbers. Yeah. I mean, if the good folks that are out there, they're working and trying to come home and go back to work, they're the victims. And then we had a whole bunch, and my beat was full up it's all apartments over there, and it was full up with crooks. And so we were never at a loss for something to do. Other beats in other areas of town, it was, 3 o'clock, it was dead.
Yeah.
Not my beat. On a cold night at 3 o'clock, we'd go into the area between Bissonnet and Bel Air and Hillcroft to Chimney Rock. There's a whole bunch of those little warehouses in there.
Yeah.
And that's where they strip cars in those little warehouses. So you'd sit out there at a cold night, you know how it gets dead still and quiet. You'd sit out there at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning and listen for the air tools. And you could hear them. Yeah, you'd hear that air wrench going. And then we'd go start prowling around trying to find them. But many, many, many stolen cars jumping up. One of them where I got hurt a little bit, but there was a burglary. It was we had Radio Shacks back then.
Yeah.
You remember Radio Shack?
Oh, barely now.
But we had 2 of them in my beat. And if the alarm call went out on Radio Shack, it was a good call.
Yeah.
A whole lot of the burglary alarms at night, you know, front blows in, 15 alarms go off, and none of them are any good. Doors rattle. If the dispatcher came on and said there was a burglary at Radio Shack, get over there because it really was. They were broke into all the time. That's where everybody went to get computers back then.
Yeah.
There wasn't Best Buy. So I go rolling up, and I was one of the last ones to get there. 2 or 3 units had already pulled up, and they had all gone around back. That's where the entry was. And as I'm rolling up on Bel Air, I see the 2 guys jumping off the roof at the front of the building. Well, the radio's kind of busy, and I get on the air. I thought I was getting on the air to tell everybody, hey, they're running. Apparently I got covered up by somebody else. They hit the ground, rolled, jumped up, and started running north across Bel Air right in front of my car. So I sped up, ran up there, and I caught one of them. The other one was still running. I'm figuring I bat 500. That's pretty good.
Yeah.
I catch him. He wants to fight.
Oh,
so
gosh.
I go to fighting with him, and me and him we're tussling pretty good. And I look up, and the other one has turned around to come back to help his buddy.
Oh, God.
And he's at a dead run right at us. So I did what we did back then. I whacked that old fellow pretty good and put him down on the ground, and he was out. I Mike Tyson'd him.
Yeah.
And the second one's coming at me. I got my flashlight in my hand, and I'm still trying to get on the radio, tell everybody, but nobody has heard me. You know, they're all over across the street at the building.
Yeah.
And this guy coming at me, he lowers his head and he leads with the crown of his helmet.
Yeah. That's a penalty.
Right at my chest. And it was a big penalty for him because I changed my angle of my swing, and I caught him really, really good and knocked him smooth out. But my finger was my finger is still numb to this day. The tip of my finger was between his jaw and my flashlight.
Oh.
It looked like you hit a grape with a hammer. I mean, it just splattered.
Burst.
And then I get on the radio. I've got 2 guys completely knocked out in front of me. And I get on the radio. It's finally calmed down enough. Said, "Hey guys, y'all are looking for the wrong place." We're across the street. I got 2 in custody.
Yeah.
They all come over there. HFD gets there. We're all friends with all the HFD guys.
Yeah.
You know, because they were out there all the time. And they roll up. And they're looking at the 2 guys laying on the ground or laying there bleeding. And they look at me, "Man, let me see your finger." They worked on my finger first.
Well, that's good.
Yeah. And then sent me off to the hospital from there. I drove myself to the hospital. But the next morning was dove season, opening day of dove season. It was my trigger finger. And I had put together this big dove hunt with about 20 officers. And I show up out there, and Scott Hickman, he's still around. And Hickman looked at me and he says, "Boy, you ain't gonna be shooting anything. It's all wrapped up." I said, "Hell, I'm not." I sat out there. He says, "Man, I'm not going to charge you." He said, "Shoot if you want to, but I ain't going to charge you anything. You ain't going to keep shooting."
Yeah.
I shot a limit of doves using my middle finger. The limit that year was 12. I fired 13 rounds because the first one that I missed, that finger hurt like hell. And I decided right then, I gotta hit what I'm aiming at and make this short and sweet. So.
That's awesome. Well, here's the other question here before we get into how that all relates. You know, you had some seniority after a while. You could have gone to different areas of town. You could have done different things, maybe avoided some of that. Was that just what made you want to stay in the hot spots?
Honestly, it was fun. I mean, I look back at it now, and it seems like just the craziest crap ever.
Dumb.
I mean,
I can say it.
I mean, we were running into everything. I mean, running around blind corners chasing crackheads. Um, just some of the dumbest stuff ever. I got in shootings. Stopping a car by myself. A guy pulls a gun on me, and he's in a stolen car with some crack. And he goes to pull his pistol up on me, and I shoot first. Another guy attacking me with a knife, butcher knife, and he had already stabbed his brother-in-law, and he's coming after me. It was a busy time, man. It was pretty damn crazy over there, but we had a brotherhood. We had a real tight group, and hell, you've met Richard.
Oh yeah.
He was at the first feeding frenzy. That was my buddy, man. That was my partner. We sat by each other in the academy, rode together on the streets, worked homicide together later on. But you want to be out there every night. You didn't want days off. The days off, something happened on your days off. Somebody got in a shootout, something bad happened. It wasn't like, whew, I wasn't there.
Yeah.
Glad I wasn't at work last night. It was damn. I should have been there with them. It's a lot like the military in that respect. You got your brothers out there, and you want to be with them all the time. And I just couldn't see leaving. And then by the time I did leave, I was top seniority out there, and all the youngsters around me were guys I had trained. And I remember, I'll tell you, my very last night on patrol, we had this guy, this young black guy, who was running around out there on a bicycle, and he was robbing all of the Central American dudes. They all worked. And on Friday nights, they all got robbed. A whole bunch of them would get robbed because they got paid in cash. And this dude would ride around on his bike with a pistol and just robbing one after another. Well, we had a good description on him where everybody's out there riding around looking. And it was my last night on patrol. And so everybody was kind of protective of me and saying, hey, man, don't get into anything tonight. That might hold up your transfer. Well, I'm trying to lay low, and I'm driving down Glenmont, and there that son of a gun is.
Of course.
Right in front of me. And I said, man, don't pull the pistol. Please don't pull that pistol out. And so I just kind of cruised along behind him. And I got on the radio, of course, told everybody what I had. So everybody's hooking them over there. And they said, okay, on you, you initiate. And the only thing I could think to do was drive up there and bump that back tire of his bike with my front bumper. And just throw him off the bike and surprise him. And he had no idea I was back there.
Oh, really?
Sure enough, I did. And he wasn't looking back. He was looking for his next victim. And I cruised up there, and I hit the brakes about the same time that I hit his back tire. And that round tire then had this little stair step in it where I bent the rim with my bumper. And it came to a sudden and screeching halt, and he went right over the handlebars. Pistol went flying, and all the other units come flying up there, and they're like, Scott, we got it. That you weren't even involved. Just why don't you take an early night and go home? Before you get into anything else. But it was right up till the last night. Just got to work.
So how did fishing get involved in this? How did this all intertwine? Because we knew what you did growing up. Dean, you're going to hear from Dean here in a little bit. And he was talking about, working out on the oil rigs and that business. And he said every time he was working, I mean, he was, I like to put it this way. Some people work to live. Some people live to work. He was working to live, but he lives to work now. How did that all intertwine? I want to end up being a fishing guide. I want to get out, do my years, whatever years you did. How did that all mesh?
Officers are always working extra job. You see them everywhere, standing around a bank, standing around at a club. I hated it. I hated doing those. I loved working, loved being on patrol, loved being out there working on homicide, chasing the bad guys, flying off to New York to chase somebody in Brooklyn, going to Miami to catch a crook, getting off the Greyhound bus. I've been all over the country chasing crooks. but I hated working those extra jobs, man.
Mm-hmm.
So I was always really good at building stuff. I mean, built this house here.
Yeah.
So I built a deck for the house, and we had a birthday party for my oldest daughter, and a bunch of people came over, and we were like, man, I really like this deck. Who did this? And I did it.
Mm-hmm.
Would you build me one? I wish my husband could build one.
Mm-hmm.
Next thing I know, I was building decks, and
Mm-hmm.
that was my extra money. And I kept doing that for a good while. Got into landscaping, some other stuff. On my time off was spent doing all that. And it was Heidi Sheasley. If anybody's into nurseries and gardening, she owns Tree Search Farm. Her and her husband hired me to do a deck at their house,
Mm-hmm.
and I was doing a lot of landscaping stuff, so I knew them through that. And I was over there building that deck, and it was 180 degrees in Houston in summer. And I remember sweating so hard, I thought that my drill was going to burn up because I was
Mm-hmm.
sweating on my drill. I thought I was going to short the damn thing out.
Yeah.
And I was doing what you're talking about. I was working to go fishing
Yeah.
and trying to make the extra money to make the boat payment because the cop salary ain't enough.
Mm-hmm.
And I was doing that. And I remember looking down at that. It honestly looked like somebody had a garden hose on that deck. And I'm looking at that and I said, what the hell am I doing? Everybody around me, I took all the guys that I worked with, I took them all fishing all the time. And all of them would always say, man, you ought to be a guide. You ought to be a guide. You ought to be a guide.
Mm-hmm.
And I've been out with guides. You're better than most of the guides I've been with. And I just never really thought about that. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I just like to fish. And at that moment, when I was staring down there at that puddle, I said, you know what? I ought to just go guide instead of doing this to
Yeah.
make my extra money.
Yeah.
And so I went to cabin school, got my license, and went on from there. Man, I knew a bunch of people in the fly fishing world. There weren't that many fly fishing guides at the time. There was one other guy in Galveston, and I was really good friends with him, Chris Phillips, and talked to Chris about it and said, you know, I don't want to step on your toes. You know, you're the only fly fishing guide down here. And he said, nope, I'd welcome it. Come on.
Mm-hmm.
And he mentored me and did a really, really big thing, helping me out, getting me lined out. Dean and I were fishing a bunch of tournaments at the time, so my name had gotten out there from winning tournaments.
Mm-hmm.
And so there was built-in customers almost immediately. And I was guiding part-time still in the police department. And my time at the police department, I was burnt out. It was time to go. And I moved on from there.
And so you did how many years in HPD?
I had 22, short of 23.
Yeah. So, but there was some crossover guiding with cops and other people and et cetera. So it's still a little bit intimidating when you go full time. And I know, officers have, good pension, good, I'm sure you saved and all that stuff, but it's still a little intimidating when you go, okay, this is what I'm going to do. And I still got a long life to live.
Yeah. I mean, I was 42 years old. I was 42. I knew I was going to work for a long time.
Yeah.
And Camille was all for it. She was ready for me to go. But the reason I left at that moment, I still was planning on doing a few more years. I got a job offer to be a sales rep for a kayak company. And they were offering to pay me more than I was making on the police department, take home truck, work from home, travel 4 states, and travel the country and talk about kayak fishing, which was just catching on at the time.
Yeah.
That led to writing 2 books about kayak fishing. And I worked for them for a pretty good while. And then a buddy that had a rep group had Shimano, and Hughes was working for him. And so I went to work as a sales rep for Shimano. I covered everything from I-10 South in Texas.
Yeah.
That one led to another rep job. The weird thing when you're in the police department, in the police department, you're almost institutionalized. Everybody has that same mentality. I'm going to do 20 years, 25 years, 30 years, whatever their goal is. My head's down and I'm going to keep working until I reach that time. And then I'll figure out what the hell else I'm going to do.
Yeah.
I went into the real world in business and I was good at it because of my people skills from all my time in homicide
Yeah.
and dealing with all these people. I mean, if you can get a confession out of somebody for a murder, you can sell them a fishing pole. It, you know, I mean, it's a big drop off.
Yeah.
So I was really successful with it, and every job I got a job offer for something bigger and better.
Mhm.
And at one point, Richard and I were going hunting, and he came to me and he said, "Man," he said, "I was walking by the coffee pot up there in Homicide the other day. I heard them talking about you, and he said, I heard your name, so my ears perked up." And one of the guys was saying, "Man, I don't know how well Scott's doing. I bet he wishes he'd have stayed here because I heard he's on his 5th job already since he left here. You know? He hadn't been gone all that long, man." And Richard looked down and said, "Yeah, and every time he changes jobs, it's a 25 to 50% pay increase for him.
Yeah.
That's why he moves." And y'all have no idea what you're talking about.
Oh, good for him.
So anyway, I was still guiding.
Mhm.
You know, I was guiding part-time in a sales rep job. Hell, I sold stuff from the water.
Yeah.
You know, I mean,
Yeah.
I was on the phone, and some of my best sales days were while I was fishing. Come
Mhm.
in and have all kind of orders sitting there waiting for me. And I sold everything, man. I sold cast iron cookware, the Lodge cookware.
Oh, that's a new one on me.
Oh yeah, I sold Lodge, I sold Kershaw, sold Coghlan camping gear, sold firearms of all kinds, rods, reels, ice chests. I
Mhm.
mean, you name it in the outdoors stuff, and I sold it. And the cool thing to me, being in homicide, nobody wanted to see you.
Mhm.
When you showed up, somebody was dead. Number
Yeah.
one, they either killed them, they knew who killed them, or they saw it happen. It was the
Yeah.
worst day of their life.
Yeah.
I went into sales. I walk in the door and everybody's like, "Hey!" Like Norman Cheers, man. "Hey, it's Scott. What you got today, man?"
Yeah.
And
Well,
so every day that I went to work, everybody was happy to see me.
that's a
And
difference.
once, guiding fishing trips, it was the same thing. People were
Yeah.
happy to see me. It
Yeah.
was like a total total 180
Yeah.
to what I've been used to.
Mhm.
And so it was just enjoyable.
Yeah.
Eventually, I got tired of the travel. I
Mhm.
would be on the road for a week, home for 4 or 5 days, and back on the road for a week.
Yeah.
And I was covering all the way to Mississippi by that point,
Mhm.
and all the way up into Shreveport, Dallas. I mean, I was covering a lot of territory. I had 400 something customers,
Mhm.
13, 14 different lines of outdoors equipment that I was repping for, and I was getting burnt out on it. And came to Camille and I said, "You know what? I think I want to sling a rod for full-time living." And
Yeah.
she said, "Thank God." She says,
Yeah.
"I've been waiting and waiting to hear you say that because you were worn out."
Yeah.
And so, I mean, by then I had enough through my part-time stuff that I
Yeah.
felt comfortable
Mhm.
that I could do it full-time,
Yeah.
and knew that I could make it.
Yeah.
And sure enough, apparently it's worked out pretty good.
It's worked out pretty damn good.
Ain't
Last
bad.
thing here, it's great. Last thing here, because I think this is a big part of kind of the who you are of this conversation, is your inquisitive nature, your the way that you dig into a topic and the science or the the everything, the details of fishing that people don't always think about or see. Where does that come from, and how did that develop?
Curiosity. And a lot of time on the water where I'm out there scouting by myself, trying to figure these fish out, trying to figure out what's going on, why. And I just surrounded myself with some good people, some fisheries biologists that I got to know along the way, and reading. I
Mhm.
mean, I'll dig in, go, Texas A&M, they have all kind of scientific papers on
Mhm.
every damn subject that you can think of on regarding fisheries. Uh, and I'll read some boring ass stuff and pick through it and pick through it and pick through it and find those little diamonds that are mixed in with it that help me out with my fishing. Uh,
Mhm.
it's all about curiosity
Mhm.
and wanting to learn it, and then just going and finding the information. It's
Yeah.
out there. I mean,
Yeah.
everything's been studied at some point.
Mhm.
You got to wade through a lot of BS.
Yeah.
There's a whole lot of it that I read that I know damn good and well that ain't right.
Yeah.
You know, some graduate student got an idea, and you can read between the lines and see that they formulated their opinion,
It's BS.
and then they work towards making their opinion correct.
Yeah,
You can see some of that, but a whole lot of it, some of the newer research, and like tarpon. I'm always looking for the next thing and the next, I feel like I got redfish pretty well figured out. I mean, I understand redfish really, really well. I still learn stuff, still learn things all the time. But overall, I feel like I got redfish pretty well figured out. I figured trout, flounder, nobody knows.
Exactly.
But now I'm on tarpon, and tarpon haven't been studied all that much. I mean, there's some studies out there, and but it's just been recent that they've really done a lot of tagging studies and starting to learn the migrations. When I was younger, the tarpon showed up, and hell, we didn't know where they came from.
You're like, hey, let's tarpon.
They showed up. They must have come from Florida, because
that's a common misconception.
Right. That's what our thoughts were. And then they started doing all the tagging and finding out that tarpon are coming from both directions. We get tarpon from Florida, and they kind of meet up over around the Mississippi River to Grand Isle area. Ours come from Mexico and work their way across there. Temperatures, their preferred temperatures, and what, all those different things, how far they move in a day. Those things just fascinate me.
Yeah.
And how old is a tarpon? The ones I'm catching on the jetties here that are under 4 feet, I didn't know they were juveniles. I knew they were juveniles more or less,
but not
I didn't know the
as
technical.
juvenile.
I didn't know the technical end of it, that they don't start spawning until they're about 8 years old and 4.5 feet. They also don't migrate until that point. So those fish that we're catching on the jetties, they live here year round. They were born here. This is where they hatched out. That spurs me on to be wanting to help with the conservation end of things. And knowing that we have a viable tarpon hatchery here. And that our fish are being hatched here. Makes me want to protect the environment more. Makes me want to be more conservation minded in the upper bays, where in the estuaries, where those little fish hatch and where they grow up. That's the kind of stuff that the reading about it eventually leads to.
It helps you.
Yeah.
Well, that's awesome, man. And as I said with Caleb and Dean, we may have to revisit this midway through the year or going into next year, because we could go on for a lot longer with each of you. But that is Captain Scott Null. I want to give you a little bit of information, background, knowledge of the guys that make this podcast so good. Captain Scott will be joining us again every week. He's one of the founding members, he and myself. And so we're going to have Captain Dean Thomas coming up next, and his story. That's next.